Greetings ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Advanced Map Making Tutorials. This is episode 11 and we are getting into the part where we actually have a game that you can start and play. We don't have any game rules yet as such, but last time we at least got our players into the arena after creating the arena in place for the battle to take place. This time we're going to step away from the game rules a little bit and do something that I've gotten many requests for, which is random loot chests, similar to the ones that we have in Entrapment and of course in many other games. Now, to begin with, we are simply going to make a system that spawns a random loot chest into the arena when we enter the game running state. So at the start of the game, we'll spawn a random loot chest in a random location that is sort of in the center of the arena. We're going to use the spread players command again. And then, of course, we're going to make this in a way such that the system can be reused and spawn new loot chests whenever we want to. First of all, though, let's take a look at these things. We have state 4, which is our in-game state, and then entering state 4, which is our first set of commands that happens whenever you start the game. So, in here we have no command currently. And this is the first command that happens whenever you enter state 4. So what we're going to do here is we're going to spawn something that acts as a marker for a chest. Now, we could put everything on this line here. We could just add a bunch of blocks here, do a spread players on, say, an armor stand or something, and then just place down a chest wherever it lands. However, that is not what we're going to do. And the reason for that is that the spread players command doesn't necessarily end us up where we want to end up. So let's say that, let's say that we just had another block like this for a spread player, and then I place a chest. In Entrapment, I had the problem that the arena is actually placed at the world build limit, so that you shouldn't be able to build yourself out of the arena. Now that introduces a problem in that there is nothing preventing the armor stand or whatever it is you're using as a marker from ending up on top of the build limit where you can't place a chest. Another pretty common example is that the spread place command doesn't have any problems with placing players or entities down inside a big lake or in water in general. It will never place the entity in the lava, but it will happily place it in water, which is probably not what you want. You probably don't want your loot chests at the bottom of the ocean, if you have an ocean. What we're instead going to do is here, all we're going to be doing is creating the armor stand marker that we're going to be using, and then we're going to reuse our state 4 clock here to detect when there is an armor stand that we need to move about. And once we detect that we are actually in a position where we can put down a chest, then we're going to put down a chest. Okay, so what does that mean in practice? Well, it means we're going back into this block and we're going to do a summon command. And that summon command is going to summon an armor stand. And that armor stand is going to go... It doesn't really matter where we put it. We could actually put it at just inside the lobby here. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to use spread players on this anyway. We're going to put in some data tags for this thing just to not have a visible armor stand popping around. So we're going to do custom name chest. And we're going to do invisible 1. This thing is not going to be marker, and it's also going to have gravity on, because we want this thing to behave as much as possible as a normal entity in the world. Okay, so we've summoned a chest, armor stand, and it's invisible. Okay, now what? Well, now we have to continue on this chain here, which, if I can remind you of that, right here is the thing that runs all the time when we are running the game. So let's go in here. This is always active. Let's just check that this is active. It is active. Good. Okay. So here, what we want to do is we want to run the spread players command. Now, which coordinates do we want? Well, we actually want the coordinates for the dead center of the arena. If you recall, the arena, if we look over at these spread players commands, starts at 64 in the x-axis and is at 0 in the z-axis. So 96 is actually dead center, because we centered the player spawns around the center of the arena on the x-axis. And the arena is 64 wide, So we're going to want 96 and 32. Let's go back here. 96, 32, 0. And then we're going to put the chest within an 8x8 square, which makes sure that it's out of reach of both the teams when they spawn in. But there's still a random element, so you can't know exactly where a chest is going to spawn. That's our max range. Respect teams, doesn't matter. We can put false and the player. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do type equals armor stand, name equals chest. Okay, so every tick of the game, this command is going to be throwing that armor stand around to a new position in the world. Well, that's great, but then what? Well, now we need to detect whether that armor stand ended up somewhere that we are satisfied with. And to do that, we're just going to add a tag onto that armor stand if it is in a place where we are satisfied. And that in turn is going to be done using an execute command, specifically an execute detect. So, execute for @e, type equals armor stand, name equals chest. Wherever that happens to be, we're going to run a detect, and in the same place again, we are going to detect air. So we want this place to be air. And then what we're going to do is scoreboard players tag @e, type equals armor stand, name equals chest, c equals 1, add spawn chest. So when we found our airspace, then we're going to add a spawn chest tag to this chest armor stand. Now, of course, if you're also worried about the build limit, then you can also add something like x equals 64, y equals 0, z equals 0, dx equals 64, dy equals 255, and you get the point. But it's not going to be a problem in our game here, so I'm not going to do that. But the point is, here you can put in whatever the requirements is that you have for your armor stand. You can also do more complicated things if you want to allow certain blocks. Then you can add this tag on first, the spawn chest tag, and then remove it if it's in water, for instance, if that's the only thing you want to avoid. However, we're fine with this, and at this point we have an armor stand called chest with a tag of spawn chest, and we need to spawn a random chest in for that one. Can we be sure that we can do that in one tick? Well, maybe. But in order to be absolutely sure, we're just going to restrict this spread players command to do only stuff that isn't tagged with spawn chest, so that whenever we have our chest armor stand in the right location, then we're going to stop spreading it around and let it be stuck in that place until we have managed to spawn a chest in that location. Now, how do we do that? Well, there is essentially two methods. One is the one that I've used in entrapment, where there's a number of fixed loot chests, and one of them will spawn in. The other is what Sparks from Accidental Games has used for his extended terrain and his loot chest, reward chests in that, and that is basically a chest with some random pieces of loot. Now, he already has a good explanation on how to make that somewhere on his channels. I'll see if I can try to find that and link that in the video description. What I'm going to explain here is the entrapment style system, where basically you want to spawn in a chest of loot out of a predefined set of chests. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we're going to need to define which chests are the available ones. So we're going to want to do that over here somewhere. I'm just going to grab a stone block so we can space ourselves out a bit. And let's say here. And then I'll show you the two different methods there are to clone those chests. I'm not going to say either one is better or worse, but we'll grab a chest and just place that down here. This is going to be the chest that is this option. We're going to be putting down many of these things, but for instance, let's just grab maybe a diamond sword and a shield. So let's put that in here. And these are the loot items for that chest. And then we can also So the way that this is going to work, if I can manage to hit that, is this way. We're going to put another chest down here. And just because I'm OCDing a bit, let's put it in the same direction. And this one is going to contain something else, maybe a bow and 64 arrows. So let's just place these in here. And then of course you can artfully arrange these as you want. Now what we want is we want to pick one of these chests and we want to spawn that into our arena. Now as I mentioned, there are two ways to do this and they have different strengths and weaknesses. Basically, a clone command cannot take two entity references. What that means is we're going to have an entity inside this chest that gets selected, and once that thing has been selected, we want to copy this chest from that entity to the place where we have our chest marked with spawn chest. Of course, that produces a problem because you can't put in two entities into a clone command. There are two ways around that. One is to use a setBlock command instead, and just simply make a setBlock command corresponding to this chest. That's easy enough because we already know what's in this chest, and I will show you a quick and easy way of doing that. The other option is to take a certain block. For instance, we could take this stone block here and clone the chest to that block and then clone it from that block to the other entity. Now that gives you more commands running, but of course it means that you don't have to make a specific setBlock command for each chest. Regardless, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to summon an armor stand into the chest, and that is the entity that we're going to be selecting from. We're going to have a custom name that is a random loot, and we're going to set custom name visible to 1 and no gravity to 1. And we have ourselves a random loot armor stand inside of this chest. And of course we're going to do the same thing again onto this chest. And now we have two random loot entities, which means that we can use the @r selector to select a random one of these. And that's how we are doing our randomized selections. Now, I want an impulse command block here to show you how easy it is to make a specific setBlock command for this chest. Now this chest has a bunch of stuff in it. This could potentially have a whole bunch of enchant data and stuff. You don't want to be typing that stuff out by hand. So what you can do is you can do a block data command in this command block. Now we're going to do a block data on the block above. And we're not going to put anything into the block data. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to toggle it to be always active, which runs it once, and you will see that it outputs a command result here. The data tag did not change, yeah, of course, because we didn't put anything in it. But you will see that it outputs the entire current data for the chest, which means we can simply go into the items list here and copy all of that. And it ends there. So we copy that. And now we can simply do our setBlock here, which would look something like setBlock with some certain coordinate to chest 0, and then this whole thing. That's how easy you can do a setBlock command for that. And then obviously you also need to get this to the right place, so you would do something like execute @e tag equals spawn chest, and then this whole thing. Now the only thing you'll need to do is you'll need to select an armor stand called random loot and then execute a block data command on that to run the impulse command block that's underneath it. Well, that's great, but then you need all of this stuff for each one. So I'm going to show you the other way too. Okay, so let's put down a repeating command block here, which we're going to set to repeating, always active. And this is going to be very similar to the other ones that we have, in that it's going to do test for @e tag equals spawn chest. Okay, so let's grab one more of these, and we're going to do a very similar thing to what these are. We're going to have this thing at, this is always active, good. Always active, repeat, but conditional. And now we're going to run some stuff off of this command block line that only happens whenever there's a chest that needs spawning. First thing we're going to do is make sure that we haven't got some old trash selected from last time. So scoreboard players tag at e type equals armor stand, name equals random loot, and then remove the selected tag. Okay, so at this point we have nothing selected. So add a chain command block in here, always active, and then just select scoreboard players tag at r type equals armor stand, name equals random loot, add selected. So now that we've gotten this far, we have one of these armor stands with a selected tag on it. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go on and actually clone the data. So this thing is 1053.00, and we're gonna do a execute at e name equals random loot, tag equals selected, and then at that entity's position we're gonna run clone. From that same position, just one block, to 1053.00. Okay, so now that we've selected one of these armor stands, we're going to clone its block down here. Okay. Now that we've done that, we can clone away from that. It's going to be very similar, so we can actually copy and paste this. And what we are copying to is a tag equals spawn chest. Now here is a decision. If you want to do more than one at once, then you can do that, but I'm actually going to do c equals 1 to only spawn one chest. If you have more than one marker, then you probably want them to each have their own random chance. And okay, now we're going to clone the opposite way, which means we remove all of this, and 1053.00, and then 2 wherever it is. So now we have cloned this block, for instance, down here, and then that block down there over to the arena over there. Okay. And then just to set things back, we can set this thing back to a stone block. And then, of course, since we now managed to spawn the chest, we're going to kill that same tag equals spawn chest c equals 1. Okay, so we managed to spawn ourselves a single loot chest with a random piece of content. At least that is the theory. Let's test it out by teleporting ourselves back into the arena. So if you recall, that is wherever we are, pretty much there. We are in our arena, and if we do summon armor stand, not an arrow, an armor stand, wherever we happen to be, and custom name chest, then since I'm spawning this manually, we'll now be able to see. So smack, and it ended up here, and something went wrong in our actual chest cloning. We can tell where this process went wrong by seeing the state of this. It definitely did a spread player, and now it has stopped doing spread players, which means that we know that this armor stand has the tag spawn chest. Now, if we want to make absolutely sure, of course we can do scoreboard players tag at e name equals chest list, and you'll see that it has the spawn chest tag. Let's go back and figure out where this went wrong. Okay, I can't quite figure out why it isn't working, and since our actual arena is unloaded, we're going to need to debug it some way, so we're just going to spawn in a random little armor stand right here called spawn chest, right there. And now we should be able to. Why aren't these triggering? Okay, well I guess it was just not triggering correctly. That's weird. Okay, whatever. Let's go on back over to the arena, and let's see. Yes, we now have our chest sitting right here with our piece of random loot, and if we summon another armor stand, let's see, called chest, we'll see that it pops over here, and it's going to be one of them. That's the other one. So that is working out nicely. Now there's only one more thing I want to touch upon, and that is the issue with random loot chests. Especially in a game like Entrapment, where you're kind of dependent on getting several of the loot chests to be able to piece together traps. And basically what I did there was make sure that once one of the random loot chests has been drawn, then we stop picking that one until all of them have been picked. So it's a random system, but it only picks every option once. Now, how would you do that? Well, it's pretty simple actually. And we can do it right here. Here, before the start of the next tick here, we still have one of the random loot armor stands that has a selected tag. So we can do stuff with that. Specifically, we can do entity data on it, at e name equals random loot, tag equals selected, and then we can simply rename it, which means that it doesn't get picked next time, right? So custom name, we could call it loot cooldown, for instance. Okay. So now we have that. If we again summon a new armor stand here, so summon armor stand right, not there, 105310, and then tags, and here we want spawn chest, we're gonna see that, well, now they both went into loot cooldown. And why is that? Well, remember last time, well, not last time actually, but previously in this series I've been talking about how the switch between these happens over 2 ticks. So there's an extra tick. And that's what happened here too. This thing is going to test for a spawn chest, but this thing is going to run off of the status for the previous tick here. How do we solve that? Well, actually it's pretty simple. Let's throw these away. And it goes into this block here. Here's where we tag a selected one, and we can simply preface that with an execute at e tag equals spawn chests equals 1. So we only run this thing if we have a spawn chest thing. Now, of course, we've messed up our state, so let's do entity data at e name equals loot cooldown, and then custom name random loot, put them back to random loot. Okay, so if we do that again then, and summon the armor stand, then we see only one of them turns into loot cooldown, and then of course that's the one that we used. Great. So now that we have that, how do we reset it? Well, it's also simple. Basically, we're looking to count how many armor stands we have left that are called random loot. That can be done with a test4 command and a stats command that is needed because we're testing for something that we want to be 0 to run a command, so you have to use the stats command to get the actual number. It's not sufficient to just have at least 1. But it can also be accomplished just using scoreboards, and I honestly just find that simpler, so let's do that. For instance, we can do this. Scoreboard players tag at e type equals armor stand name equals game, add no loot available. Okay, so when we get here, we're going to add a no loot available tag to the game armor stand, and let's just copy this real quick. In this following block, we're simply going to do execute at e type equals armor stand name equals random loot, and then we're going to run this whole thing and just remove that tag. Actually, just to be a bit efficient, we can put c equals 1 here. So if we have at least one armor stand that is called random loot, then we're going to run this command, which removes the no loot available tag from the game armor stand. And then, of course, one more thing is execute off of at e type equals armor stand name equals game tag equals no loot available. And if that is the case, then we're simply going to do entity data on everything that is armor stand named loot cooldown, and we're gonna rename it right back to random loot. Like that. So let's put that to the test. We have one loot cooldown and one random loot. Let's summon an armor stand. Now both of them are random loot. Summon it again. Loot cooldown on one of them. Summon it again, and they're both back to random loot. And now, of course, if we would keep doing this, put more and more chests in, then we would have a much bigger selection before we cycle back to having everything available again. So that's a pretty useful way to sort of do random selection of loot chests in specific in this case, but really pretty much anything. Just random selection with exclusion, so you only use up each random option one at a time. Random loot done and done, and that is way enough for this time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section down below. And I will try to tailor this series after what your desires are to learn in the future. Next time though, I think we're going to go straight on to scorekeeping and round control. We will see though, I have a pretty busy few weeks coming up, so that episode might be ever so slightly late. Anyway, thank you for watching. My name is slicedlime, and I will see you in another video. Take care, bye bye.